Denver Sports presents the Mile High Hockey Podcast with Mike Evans, presented by Fort Comfort Gutters. Now here's your host with the latest on the Burgundy and Blue, Mike Evans.
Hey everybody, welcome into the Mile High Hockey Podcast. I'm Mike Evans, and the good times keep rolling for the Colorado Avalanche. 9 straight wins after yesterday's pulsating, come-from-behind win over the Pittsburgh Penguins. A game in which the Avalanche trailed 4-0, rallied, forced overtime, and won in overtime on a goal by Jonathan Drouin. So much to talk about from this game. Only the third time in Avalanche franchise history that they have come back from 4 goals down. So an incredible a game, an incredible accomplishment. It continues to speak to this team's ability to come from behind. They seem very comfortable coming from behind. It does raise a question, though, and I'll toss this out to all of you, kind of a question to think about a little bit. If the Avs, if you could choose, the Avalanche, known for being a quick starting team that jumps on opponents early, or a team that gets off to slow starts but is so good at coming from behind, which quality would you want them to be known for? What would you want their strength to be? I thought about it back and forth, and make no mistake, there's something to the idea of being able to jump on teams early. But the idea that you can be behind and that feeling up and down the bench or in between periods that there's still plenty of time left and that once we get our game going, we're hard to stop. You knew it. You knew once the Avalanche started to chip away and they got it to a 2-goal deficit, you just knew it was inevitable. As Nathan McKinnon said after the game, human nature is when you have the lead like that, especially on the road, you start just trying to dump pucks out of the zone. You stop playing the way that you played to get the lead. And it just, there was a sense of inevitability that the Avalanche were going to come back and eventually tie that game. And they did, and they end up winning it. So if you had to choose quick starts or the strong finishes, what would you go with? Give me the ability to come from behind. It's so difficult to do. So many teams struggle with it that the fact that the Avalanche seems so much almost comfortable with facing down deficits, sure, I'd like them to be able to jump out on top more often. Sure, I remember the Seattle series a year ago in which they gave up the first goal in every game. So I get that it's not an exact science, but it would seem to me that an Avalanche team that is able to score the first goal and get up 2-0, I feel pretty confident with an Avs as a front-running team if they're able to do that. But I think that it's more important to be able to come from behind and to be able to handle adversity, face it down, and still find a way to get it done. So give me the ability to come from behind, as the Avalanche have done so well throughout the course of the season. I'll take that. The accomplishments of Nathan McKinnon, my goodness. Passes Joe Sakic as the single-season point leader now in Avalanche history, 122 points. Joe had the mark at 120. And you got to start thinking about Nathan McKinnon's place in Avalanche history and where this thing is going. And I think it's easy to say that he's going to rewrite the record books. And I think it's fair to say that he's going to go down as the GOAT, the Avalanche GOAT, the greatest of all time. I do think he still needs to win a Stanley Cup, another one, because Sakic, Forsberg, Waugh, that whole group, that core, they won 2. And so while I think that Nathan McKinnon's, his numbers, and by the way, I could probably include Cale, Makar in this, but let's just talk about McKinnon, that when it's all said and done, McKinnon's going to hold the statistical records, which will give him claim to being the greatest Avalanche to ever wear the sweater. But does he have to win another Stanley Cup to go along with it? Could he continue to put up 100-point seasons for the next, 5-6 years or more and not win a Stanley Cup and go down as the greatest Avalanche player of all time? It'd be a great argument, and you'd certainly have plenty of people who would be making the case for him. Me personally, I still think the weight of those championships and being a core key guy on a championship team carries so much weight. And the fact that he has 1 right now, whereas a guy like Sakic has 2, I don't know if I could bump him, in my mind, over Sakic. maybe even over Forsberg. But make no mistake, what he's doing right now, and we're having these kind of debates between McKinnon and Sakic, for example. I mean, we're talking about razor thin, the ultimate 1-1A type arguments here. So that's an argument for another day. But it is interesting what we're looking at right now, because this Avalanche core certainly, and the rest of this team now, looks like a team that is obviously they're a huge Stanley Cup contender, if not the team to beat now for the Stanley Cup. More on that in a second. But it is fun to
break for a second. Go. Just stop right there. You just keep going. Right here.
All right.
Ready?
There you go. Oh, all right.
That's Paul.
Thank you, Paul. All right. Do I give a plug here?
Yeah.
Paul the burrito guy?
Tamale Kitchen.
Tamale Kitchen. Okay.
So I just didn't want you to go star.
All right. Thank you. I appreciate that. All right. Little play-by-play in the middle of the podcast there. We'll keep it in there. We'll keep it in there.
Heck yeah, you will.
All right. Matt's looking at me like, yeah, he's got it. We're good. All right, we're good. All right, we keep rolling them. Hey, a little bit of a, I mean, do you think I'm going to turn down a free breakfast burrito? No way. Are you kidding me? Where was I? Oh, okay. So the core of the Avalanche team that we're watching right now, it's setting up to be a fascinating debate, because you've got this Avalanche core versus the core that won the 2 Stanley Cups back in the day. You got Waugh, you got Sakic, you got Forsberg, you got their core versus McKinnon, Makar, rantenen. Which team's core is going to go down as the better one? And I love where this is going, because I think it's going to make for a fascinating debate. And it does, though, still come down to the idea of the Avs winning another cup. So let's talk about that. Where are the Avalanche now when it comes to being a Stanley Cup contender? To me, it's all changed since the trade deadline. There's just no other way to put it. Before the trade deadline, I looked at the Avs as a good team. And in an NHL that is filled with a lot of good teams, and we're not really sure necessarily who the real great teams are, then I was content with calling the Avalanche a good team that was in the mix with a bunch of other teams. Now, I look at the Avs as the best team in the West, and maybe outside of Florida or Carolina, the best team in all of hockey. And it's amazing what the Avalanche did at the trade deadline and how it has improved the outlook of this team, taking them from a team that was good but part of a group to a team that now looks like they could be great and be really, really special compared to the rest of the league. The rest of the conference, I look at the Avs, and it's amazing how things have changed now, because prior to the trade deadline, there were any number of teams that I could say, yeah, that team can beat the Avs in a playoff series. That team worries me. That team scares me. That team can beat the Avs. But now I look at the Avs since the acquisitions and just the way they're playing and the confidence and the depth and the options that they have and the different line combinations. I mean, Jonathan Drouin, for example, gets shifted up to the top line midway through the game, ends up having a great game, scores the game winner. And it shows that Jared Bednar is, while trying to still find that continuity. It's funny because, wise guys like me are always like, well, you got to develop continuity. You got to gel and everything like that. One thing that Bednar has done now throughout ever since the trade deadline, it seems like he's not as much dead set on here's the line, let's make sure they get 10 or 15 games playing together so that they can gel. He's more like, hey, I'm the mad scientist right now. I want to find different combinations. I want to mix up lines. I want to give different looks for teams to think about. I want to see the combinations that might click and then file that away for the playoffs. And he's got the endorsement of the people that matter. Nathan McKinnon said after the game, when asked about shifting Drouin on up, he said, I'm fine with that. When things are getting stale, absolutely. Mix up the lines. Try to create a new kind of energy. Players like it. So that's good enough for me. But back to where the Avs are. I now look at the Western Conference playoff picture, and it's funny because now there is not one team that I would fear. I think now you just look at it differently. Now, like, who are the teams that could potentially be a threat to the Avalanche? And when I say a threat, I'm not coming out and saying a team that's going to beat the Avalanche 4 times in a 7-game series. I'm just talking about a team that can threaten them a little bit. It's funny because, and I'll throw another question to you as the Avalanche fan watching this to answer is, do you go hard for first place in the Central Division, first place overall in the West, knowing that the reward for finishing first is a likely first-round matchup with either Nashville or Vegas, a Nashville team that's been among the 2 or 3 hottest teams in hockey over the last month and a half, or a Vegas team that, for all their struggles, is still the defending Stanley Cup champs, and they have a whole new hockey team waiting to come off long-term injured reserve by the time the playoffs come around, so they could be potentially a handful. Yet if you finish second or third and don't win your division, you get Dallas or Winnipeg in the first round. So it's a question that I'll let you think about. As a fan, what are you rooting for? Finish first overall, get Nashville or Vegas, or finish second or third in your division and get Dallas or Winnipeg in the first round. It's a tough question because I think I would go for finishing second or third. And again, this is the little, addendum to this conversation. There's no team in the West right now that scares me. It's just talking about potential threats and who could make you have to work a little harder, who could make you sweat a little bit more. Honestly, I think Nashville or Vegas right now makes me sweat more than a Dallas or Winnipeg does. And I know that there are those of you out there who really are genuinely concerned about Dallas. I don't get it. I just don't see it. We're totally on opposite ends of the spectrum on that one because I just don't see the Dallas threat like some of you do. Back to Jonathan Drouin for a second. The way that he's been playing, really for a good chunk of the season, what a terrific move by the front office. Now, the Avalanche front office did not have a good summer, okay, in terms of going out and the moves that they made. They had what looks to be a terrific trade deadline, but they didn't have a great offseason. But Jonathan Drouin was definitely a hit. 1 year, $900,000 flyer on Jonathan Drouin. It was a value deal, absolutely nothing to lose type thing. If he comes in and he plays well, awesome. If he doesn't, you didn't make that much of an investment. So it was a low-risk, high upside type move. And boy, has it worked out that way. To the point where I think now you have to be thinking new contract for this guy, right? I mean, this is a guy you want to have moving forward. And he's probably not going to break the bank. And so if you can work out a 2 or 3 year deal with Jonathan Drouin, I think he's now played himself into that category of, man, we really want you back. And let's talk about a deal. Let's talk about a semi-long-term deal. Let's try to make that happen because it's clear that, and the whole argument was this is a guy that was uber talented coming out. He hasn't really lived up to his billing, but coming here, much like Val Nichushkin, who had struggled in Dallas for all those years, the idea you come here, you're surrounded by better players, you're involved in a winning type culture, that it brings out the best in your game, helps revitalize your career. It happened with Val, and it certainly looks like it's happening here with Jonathan Drouin. And so I think it wouldn't shock me at all if you heard an announcement, sometime between here and the end of the regular season, or certainly soon after the regular season starts, hopefully in June, late June, that Jonathan Drouin's agreed to a new deal with the Avalanche. He certainly played well. He certainly earned it. So why not? So good times right now for the Avalanche. They're rolling right now. 9 wins in a row. Some more nods to Nathan MacKinnon. I mentioned the single-season point record now, passing Joe Sakic. He's got joining Wayne Gretzky. This is amazing stuff. So only he and the Great One have had 2 17-plus point streaks during the course of the same season. So 2 different streaks of 17 games or more. Only 2 times in NHL history has it been done. Well, 2 different players. Gretzky being Gretzky's, did it more than once. But only 2 players have done it, Nathan MacKinnon and Wayne Gretzky. Nathan MacKinnon and Wayne Gretzky for this one. Nate closing in on Gretzky's record for most points streak at home to start a season. We've been following it all year long. It keeps steadily going up. It's up to 34 now as we're talking, and trailing now only Gretzky's 40. And it certainly feels like he's going to get it. Why not, right? So great accomplishment by Nathan MacKinnon. What a season. It's got to end. It's got to end in a Hart Trophy. Come on, this is not me sitting here as a homer or anything like that. This is just me as a hockey fan. And I'd like to think that if I was doing this show, this podcast in another city, maybe not named Tampa or Edmonton, but even if I was in those towns, I'd like to think that I'd be able to look you straight in the camera with a straight face and say, hey, man, Nathan MacKinnon has been the best player, start to finish, in the NHL, and he deserves the Hart Trophy. I think it's going to happen. I hope it happens. I'm trying to speak it into existence, but let's see what happens. But he just continues to play at an incredible level. The numbers, the eye test, you put it all together, it just screams MVP. So Avs, keep it rolling. 9 in a row. Going to be home all week. Should be a lot of fun. We'll be back later in the week to talk about what's happening with this hockey team, and hopefully the win streak continues. Thank all of you for watching. Want to thank our great engineer. I got the name now. Matt Melchizedek. Woohoo! I got it. I had to write it out phonetically. Melchizedek. We got it done. And thank you, or sorry for the little interruption, but lunch, baby. I got lunch, so I'm looking forward to that. We'll see you again later this week on the Mile High Hockey Podcast.